Namaste. I'd like to welcome you this afternoon to the noon meditation, satsang, with Swami Pranananda. This afternoon, I'd like to meditate with you on the Kriya Yoga Sutras, and more specifically about the Ashtangas. The Ashtangas are the Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. And I remember when I first went to the temple, not knowing anything about yoga or anything like that, and Pranananda mentioned that in one of his meditations when I was first there, and I thought that was one word, because he was talking about the Ashtangas. And it turns out that it's not. It's a whole series of words, a series of steps, 8 steps that are called the Ashtangas. The root of Ashtanga is 8, so there's 8 steps to it. And the Ashtangas are divided into 2 categories. You'll find that in life everything is paired. It has 2s, and the 2 are always. I used to think of them as a polarity, or excuse me, I used to think of them as a duality, 2 different things, but they're not. Everything in life is a polarity, and by polarity it means it's one thing, but it has 2 parts to it. Dealing with the Ashtangas, we have yoga, but we also have which the yoga has to do with the techniques and things like that. But you also have the Shankar philosophy. So there's a second part to it. And you think of Shankar as the philosophy. So you have the philosophy and then you have the techniques. And the 2 together form a whole. They're not separate from each other. The philosophy and the techniques go together. And as I was just mentioned, they form a polarity. Polarity means one side and then another side, a positive side and a negative side. And it's kind of like if you think of a magnet is a one thing, but it has a positive side and a negative side in one of these bar magnets. And so it has a positive side and a negative side, and you can say, well, which side is the good side and which side is the bad side? And if I say that about a magnet, you think to yourself, well, that's a silly question. Well, that's what all life is about. All life is a polarity, which means it has a positive side and a negative side. But if you say, well, which side is good and which side is bad, mystically speaking, a mystic would hear that and say that question doesn't make any sense. Again, you take a magnet, which side is the good side, the positive side or the negative side, the positive pole or the negative pole? It's a nonsensical question. When you deal with good and bad in life, it becomes a nonsensical question. Life is just one thing. It's life. In yoga, we even go to the point where we say, all life is sacred, and everything in life is sacred. And so that kind of unifies this whole idea of what is life all about, and who's good and who's bad, and what's right and what's wrong. And the yoga says there is no such thing as right and wrong or good and bad. But then, of course, you say, well, you look around and you see a lot of bad things happening. And in yoga, we would say there's a problem that exists. And what the negativity is the misunderstanding of the problem or not understanding what the problem is. And that's what yoga is about. That's what the sutras are about. That's what the Ashtangas are about. And, these 8 steps that we have. If I were to just break them apart, like I said, when I first started, I thought it was one word, but you have the yamas and the niyamas. And, here we go again with the polarity, or you take the two and you put them, two things, and you put them together. If you deal with the Ashtangas, you start with the yamas and niyamas. There's a polarity. Yamas are the things that you should not do and the things that you should do. Categorized together, or they're put together because they're related to each other, obviously. Things that you should do. And of the things that you should do in dealing with the yamas the things that you should not do with the yamas, of all the things that you should not do is you should not be violent. And then in the Yoga Sutras, we go the next step. We say, okay, there's 3 stages that we're going to deal with, and so you have to be nonviolent on the mental level, nonviolent on the verbal level, and nonviolent on the physical level. So anyway, you have that polarity that exists there, and then you have the asanas and pranayama. Asanas are the postures. And pranayama is the currents, the life currents that flow within us. And so you have those that are paired together. The asanas, the hatha yoga is very important. This is going to be a tough statement for me to make, and maybe a tough statement for people to hear. But I believe that it's important to practice the asanas, to practice the hatha yoga on a daily basis. It's as important, I believe, as the meditation. We say you should meditate every day, and by the way, the meditation comes a little in a few minutes, dealing with the Ashtangas and Kriya Yoga. But I think the hatha yoga should be done every day. If nothing else, Pranananda, at least from what I remember back in the past, Pranananda would talk about the hatha yoga and the asanas, and he would say, okay, if you can't do a whole routine or a whole series of postures, that you should do at least 2 postures each day. And the 2 that he mentioned, or at least that I remember him mentioning, were the posterior stretch, which is a forward bend, and it deals with the opening up of the base chakra, the Saturn chakra, and then that's paired with the cobra postures. The cobra posture is when you get the prana within the physical body to ascend outside of or beyond the Muladhara chakra, the Saturn chakra. And so you have the asanas and the pranayamas, again, linked together in this duality. But you do the forward bends with the posterior stretch, that's a forward bend, and then the backward bend being the cobra, which is linked to it. And then once the chakra is open, you do the backward bend to get the currents, the pranayamas, to ascend up the spinal column. And what's important about the asanas, the hatha yoga postures, is that they give you a technique, a methodology. There's a methodology that exists there where you open up one of the chakras with one posture, and then with the counter posture, or with the posture that's linked to it, you get the current to a side, and then you go up to the Swadhisthana chakra, the Jupiter chakra, which is just above the base of the spine, the Saturn being in the base of the spine. Then you go up to the Jupiter chakra. And then, of course, there's postures for each of the chakras. You go to the Mars chakra, the Venus, the Mercury, and up to the Sun, Moon. And if you're really enthusiastic, you do a whole routine which starts at the base of the spine, it opens up, ascends the pranayama. And I say, by the way, when I say it ascends, I'm talking about ascending up through the spinal column with the ultimate objective of getting it to ascend to the top of the spinal column. You start at the base and you start at the top, and you want it balanced. You want it up the center of the spinal column. I guess there's something in me that says that I have to say that in this working with this, moving the currents up the spinal column, if you can get it balanced and centered, you're an adept, you're in an advanced stage, because for most of us, that current coming up is pulled away from the center of the spinal column by things that we think, by things that we say, by things that we do. The things that cause difficulties in life are what pull those currents either to the left side. We say the left side being an emotional difficulty that we would have, or the right side, which is an intellectual type of difficulty. And depending on where we're at in the evolution, in our evolution, we get pulled one way or the other. We get a little too emotional, or we get a little too logical with our lives. And when we do that, it causes problems. And then, of course, each of the chakras is linked to a daily activity, very specifically. And if you're interested in knowing what the activities are and how they're linked together, then I think what Kriyananda would suggest the best way to do that is through the study of astrology, because the astrology, you link the chakras with the planets, the planetary forces, and there's a very well-defined system, astrology, which you can go to a library or a bookstore and get all sorts of books that will all tell you pretty much, if they're halfway decent book, they'll pretty much tell you the same thing. They might tell you in a little different way, but they say the same thing. And so you're trying to move up the spinal column and with that. And then as you move from there, you move up to the Mars chakra, and then the Venus, Mercury, again, the Sun and Moon. And we get to if I can say it this way, a threefold pattern. The threefold pattern being that when I started talking about the yamas and niyamas, and I said those are the things that you shouldn't do and the things you should do. And I mentioned the things that you should not do. Kriyananda quite often, well, I don't want to say quite often, but what I remember him saying is nonviolence, and that's why I mentioned it. Now there's 5 other related types of things, but if I just stay to keep it simple with the idea of nonviolence, and it's on a psychological level, and then you have it also on the verbal level where you practice nonviolence, and then you have it on a physical level. You don't be physically violent. That's the yamas. Then you get to the niyamas that balance that. While you're practicing the things that you shouldn't do, again, forgive me if this is maybe being a little bit harsh, but all of us wind up in our lives involved in violent types of activities, whether it's harsh words or all the way down to actual physical violence. It's good, bad, or otherwise. It's just kind of where we've gotten as a species at this point in time, where a lot of that violent activity is manifesting on all the levels. We're thinking thoughts that we shouldn't be thinking, thinking, saying words that we shouldn't be saying. And that makes me think when I'm retired now, but when I was at work, and I used to speak about this, where we would get around the water cooler, okay, right? Everybody gets around the water cooler, right? And then you're there and you're talking, and maybe a little bit starts with business, but then pretty quickly it gets to, oh, you remember what Mary Jane did the other week? And you remember what John did? That's violence. That's verbal violence, talking about who did what, and they're not talking about the great things that they did. Obviously they're talking about the faults that they have, and exaggerating the faults and chopping off legs. They can't grow bigger, so we can't grow bigger or above someone. So what we do is we chop off their legs, and then we can feel that we're taller than they are. It's a psychological reality. But the idea here with the dealing with the Ashtangas, dealing with yoga and dealing with Hatha yoga, is to start getting control of it. Just start getting control of it. For most of us, I think, and Kriyananda has said this, we're past the physical part, the physical violence. But we really haven't gotten past the verbal violence. That's pretty much alive and well in the world that we live in today. And so we need to work on that a lot. And then also the mental violence, which we can get caught up in, and it's easy to. You get the physical violence semi-mastered or halfway mastered, and then you get into the verbal part of it, and I found that I've been able to get fairly well along the way with that, although it's still challenging. Even in my late age, I have to constantly be careful of the things that I say. And, you try and communicate with people and deal with people. And especially where we're at in the world today, where there's so many problems and so much, you actually have opposition. You don't have a polarity where everybody has kind of some common ground. It's gotten to the point where it's just you're either on one side or the other. As a yogi, you got to be able to sit in the middle and say, well, I can see both sides of it. And you understand both sides of it and beware of it as much as you can and as best you can. It's difficult, but you just keep working on it. Just before I forget to say it, or so that I don't forget to say it during the meditation, I'm talking about these, and I mentioned about the 8 stages of yoga, the yamas, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, and they're talked about from starting with the yamas, things you don't do, and they go up to samadhi, and there's kind of a hierarchy there. Not kind of, there is a hierarchy there. And what they'll say is that what you have to do is you have to master one of the first one, the yamas. You have to master the yamas before you master the niyamas. And then you have to master the niyamas before you get to the pranayamas. And when I first started to get more educated about the Yoga Sutras and that, and what we're dealing with, when I first heard that, what I thought was, what I do is focus on the niyamas, and I just do that, and that's all I work on. And until I get that mastered, then I can't go beyond that. And I had trouble because I says, well, wait a minute. I mean, you get to meditation, and meditation is up at that's the seventh step. There's 8 steps, and so why am I meditating if I haven't mastered the yamas yet, the niyamas and everything below that? And the answer is because it's not that you just work on one stage at a time and then move up to the next stage. You work on all 8 stages, all 8 steps as you move through life. You're working on all of them all of the time. But what it is you master one at a time. You master the yamas first, then you master the niyamas, and the niyamas are the things you should do. I mentioned that Kriyananda would talk about the thing you shouldn't do. The key one there was nonviolence. Well, the key one with the things that you should do is contentment, santosha, be calm and peaceful. And that's the niyama that is the one that you kind of be aware of, and you start with. Again, there's 5 of them, and then you start going to the other ones and working with the other ones. But you do the nonviolence, and that obviously, as you start to become less and less violent, you also become more and more content with life. If you think about it, if you meditated long enough, you realize that the less violent you do become, the easier it is to become content and work with the contentment and move up into that stage of the Yoga Sutras. And then there's the the asanas. And the asanas are the physical aspects. So you have, I'm saying the more subtle things, the yamas and niyamas, the nonviolence and the violence, there's a very strong psychological part of that. And I'm saying that, and then you get to the hatha yoga and the hatha yoga practices, and there you have a very strong physical mechanism that's occurring. And so you're doing that and working with that to direct and redirect and get the prana that flows within you. And the prana is really what, that's the energy. That's the energy, that's the heat, where you get in the body that is life. A cadaver is a dead thing. What's alive is the heat within the body. And the heat within the body works with the pranayama, the prana. The two are related together. And again, they're linked together, this polarity that's there. And so you're moving up to the second 2 stages, or the third stage and the fourth stage, where the third stage is the physical postures that you do and work with them. And just like in life, we as yogis want to be spending our time becoming less violent, becoming more content. We also want to spend time working with the physical body and doing the postures. Again, I think Kriyananda would suggest doing every day at least one, but even better than that is to have a nice little yoga session that you kind of have, that's your own personal yoga session. And you can go into Kriyananda's book, and he lists the postures. He links how they're linked. He describes how they're linked to the chakras. And so you can pick two of the postures, one for opening up the chakra and one for getting the currents to ascend in a balanced fashion, and work on the asanas, on the postures. And as you do that, you start to realize that all of these are working together. The yamas, the niyama asana, and the pranayama almost come together and work together to get you to a point where you realize your life is becoming better. If you're working on them, and if you're, I guess I should say, maybe doing them properly. But sometimes even if they're not doing them quite properly, you work on them and you work on improving them. It's not that easy to do the yoga postures properly. It would be a lot easier to say, I just give up, I can't do it. I know I struggle with that myself, so, but I do it, and I work with it and say, okay, I do the best I can. It might not be perfect, I can't quite get to where the full posture is, but certainly I do notice that over the years, there's been an improvement. It seems like I've gotten to a point where almost like there's a wall there. I can't quite, the improvement is there, but it's very, very slow and tedious. So, but anyway, and then you have the pranayamas, and there's techniques, again, Kriyananda, spiritual science of Kriya Yoga, he gives techniques, pranayamas that can be done. And the pranayamas help you, as they're given, as they were developed by the ancient sages, to get that current, that's that kundalini current that you have, which is a balanced current up the spinal column. These 4 stages, as you work with them, you become that energy or that current which is flowing up the center of the spinal column, or supposed to be flowing up the spinal column, slowly but surely becomes less imbalanced. Less energy is pulled out of the center. And as you work with it, if you do the practices and these first 4 stages, as you do them, you'll notice that your life changes. Sometimes you don't notice yourself. Sometimes some people will practice the yoga, do the yoga and all of that. And as they do that, one day, I know it's happened to me, one day someone comes up to you and says, "You're different." You say, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? And they say, no, there's something different about you. I remember when, a year ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, they remember how you were. And they look at you now and they see the way you talk. They see the way you think. They see the way you act. And they say, you've changed. There's something different. And there's a positivity that goes along with that. It's not a negative. They're not saying you've changed, gotten worse. They're saying something kinder, gentler, or whatever the word is you want to use, about the way you are and about who you are and what you are. And it's happening on a physical level. That soul becomes, you don't see it. It's happening within you. It's happening within us. I'll include myself in the picture, but it's happening within all of us. There's something that happens when you start practicing yoga, Kriya Yoga, which is the Kriya Yoga Sutras. But there's something that happens as you practice yoga, and the more you practice it, the better you get. And as your life balances out and becomes less extreme, becomes less violent, becomes more peaceful, what you come to realize is that your family life becomes more balanced and more people. Your relationship with your spouse, your relationships with your brothers and sisters and family, and that becomes easier, more balanced. With your parents, if that's the case, with your children, if that's the case. It's just it's a package deal. Everything in life is linked with everything else, and your life is linked with somebody else's life. Again, there's that polarity. We look at ourselves and we look at another person and we see a duality. We see an opposition. We see another personality, a second personality. And then we have our personality, and there's some things that are harmonious between the two, and then there's some things, of course, that are very irritating between the two personalities, and you're slowly trying to deal with that. If you're doing your yoga right, over time, what you start to realize is those irritations become less irritating. They're still irritating. They're still irritating, but they're less irritating. And your personality becomes gentler, so they're looking at you and say, well, you're a little less irritating too. And you can go out and have some fun together in spite of the differences in the beliefs and the thoughts that we have and the things that we do. And those are the four lower stages of the Ashtangas that we deal with, and they all deal with the external world. They're dealing with the external yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. In a overt way, they deal with how you interact with other people primarily. Probably 90% of your interaction is those four lower rungs of the ladder, and it's with other people. But then they say, okay, well, then there's the relationships that you have between you and animals, nature, the plants, and then just the universe at large. Whether you want to talk about the Earth and the solar system and all of that. These four first stages are more concrete, they're more external, and you're dealing with the balancing and trying to harmonize with you and the rest of the world. And then you get into the inner four, which is the pratyahara, and pratyahara means interning. There's a technique where you close your eyes, your ears, your mouth, and nose, and for a moment you stop all the external senses. And the purpose of that is externally you actually physically try and stop the external noise that's happening, the senses that are going out from you and collecting information from around the world. They're very distracting. The senses are pulling you out of that balanced state. They're taking the kundalini current and pulling it out to an imbalanced external, more or less concrete type of events that occur. And in the practice and dealing with the Hatha Yoga practice, the Kriya Yoga practice, at some point you want to try and stop all of that from happening. And at first you do it physically by closing off all the senses. And again, there's a technique that Pranananda gives that's fairly well known in closing off the senses. And then what you do is, if you do that, it brings your awareness, your attention to an internal state. And over time, as you practice it more and more, if you practice meditation more and more, over time, eventually what you find, I believe what you'll find, what I found, what I think you'll find is that you can actually start to withdraw from the world without having to close off the senses physically. You literally go into your meditation and you can pull in, and you get into, for me it's a huge problem, and I'm assuming it's a huge problem for you, is you pull in, so you kind of get out of the outer sense world and world activity, but inside you got this whole machine, brain, mind thing where thoughts are just flooding through your head, through the mind, and it's just one thought after another thought after another thought. And you try and do the pratyahara, it was just to get rid of the external senses, but you find yourself inside of your head. And maybe if you're like me, you find there's a big mess in there. It's awful lot going on. And in yoga, part of the practice, the Patanjali's, the Yoga Sutras, and all of this, a whole part of this is what you do is you got these 10 million thoughts going through your head, and you take one of them and you throw it away, and you kind of get rid of it, or you try and get rid of it as best you can, and then you get another thought and then another thought. And as you do that, maybe you start grouping, because there's so many there, you start grouping the thoughts, and you get to get those thoughts out of your head, and you say, I want to stop thinking about those thoughts, and you get rid of them slowly, one by one by one. And that's a lifetime process, I guess, or a multi-lifetime process in trying to do that. Although in this lifetime, obviously, you're working on it. Again, you have all of the stages. You're working on all the stages together, and but you're mastering one at a time from the top to the bottom. But you have this the sense withdrawal moving into your head, and you can do the technique, the object of beauty technique helps with this, because now you can focus on one thing, and that's what the purpose of that is. It's a technique where you're thinking about something, you're bringing your attention to one thing, and you're using your emotions to get you to that point. The emotions, which is why you want to think of something that's beautiful, something that has something meaningful to you and is important to you, but that you find beautiful, whether a flower or a sunset, or whatever it might be. And so the idea there is you're trying to get rid of all these sensory things that are out there, pulling your mind out from that internal world into the outer world. That's what it wants to do. Its nature is to pull you into the world, and you're struggling to fight against that, to keep your awareness inside the head, inside of the mind, and to get rid of the thoughts that are in the mind. The neti technique. But your thoughts are in the mind, and you're trying to get rid of them, and then you focus on one thing, and you get to that point where you can just focus on one thing, and then, like the pratyahara, the sense withdrawal, it's linked with the next step, which is dharana, which is concentration. And so you're getting rid of all of these ideas and superfluous thoughts and things like that, and focusing on one object of beauty, and then you're moving to a state of concentration. You find that you can kind of get rid of the ideas, you get rid of the thoughts, but you pull them there and pull them onto an object, your object of beauty, and you get them to focus there, and you're now activating that sixth stage of yoga, or you're entering into that sixth stage of yoga, which is now you're concentrating on the object, not as the object, but as something that's beyond the object. And there's an awareness that it takes an effort. If you're not diligent in what you're working with and what you're thinking about, your mind is on the picture, the picture of the flower. Let's use a flower, a rose. That's the blossoms are opening, or the petals are opening, and you get transfixed on that, and so you can focus on that. You can take your senses and bring your senses inward, and then you have this awareness. It's taking an effort to do that, and that effort is the sixth stage of yoga, with the sixth stage being the concentration. So you're concentrating on the object, but there's an effortfulness that exists there. And what I was going to say was, what I found with this sense withdrawal over the years, over the decades, that I go in now with the sense withdrawal, and when I come out of the meditation, it's difficult to explain, but you come out of the meditation and you walk out of the room and you have a realization. I remember sitting there, I remember meditating, and I remember everything, but there's just a subtle awareness that your consciousness was there. It was all in the meditation. It wasn't outside. You knew what was going on outside, or you can tell you're aware of what's going on outside. You knew about it while you're there. But it's a very funky type of thing that happens where you move out of the meditation and you realize, wow, there was a withdrawal internal into yourself, and you were becoming more and more aware of something that was happening there. And maybe you got all the thoughts on all these crazy ideas coming through and thinking and all this stuff happening. But at the same time, something is going on, because you realize over time, over the years, over the decades, again, with the meditation, your concentration is improving, your withdrawal from the world is improving, and your ability to concentrate also is improving. And it's happening. You move out of the meditation, you say, wow, it was weird, but it was a nice weird. Whatever it was, that's happening, and whatever it is that's going on there, it's really nice. And you say to yourself, I wish I could do that better. I wish there was some way I could do that all the time, do it better, because that's the other thing. One day comes and the meditation is so difficult. And then another day comes and it seems like you kind of glide into it and it just works. And it's a nice feeling. But what I'm finding out is that whether it's one of those difficult days where you can't really get things together, or weeks or months, sometimes it can go on for quite a while where you have the trouble, but then suddenly it'll come together. in a meditation, and you say, that's, I got to keep striving and working towards getting to that. And then it's the seventh step, which is what we keep talking about. We say meditation, but when we say meditation, we're talking about all these 6 steps that go before it, because they're combined together. They're all really mixed together in some way. So you move into the meditation, but if you're really lucky, for a moment, every once in a while, you'll be able to, while you're concentrating, just for a moment, you'll feel the meditation where for a moment you get rid of that effort that's required to keep the mind still. And it's all practice. It's practice continuously, over and over and over again with the practice. And it's the practice of the 7, I think, the 8 stages of yoga. And you practice all of them all the time. Until you get to the 7th stage, which is the samadhi. And the way I hear it described, usually if you go online, or if I go online and you type in samadhi, what is it? What I remember being conveyed is contemplation. That was the word that I kept hearing, that samadhi is like contemplation. But then somewhere along the line, I heard a different word, and to me, I liked it better. You have to kind of figure out yourself which one is best for you. But the word that I heard was absorption. And just for me personally, that this, if there's a word that I could use to try and talk about samadhi, it would be absorption, where you're there and you're absorbing the universe and everything that exists within the universe. And those are the 8 stages combined to one: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. How about that one word? And then you move out of the meditation and you go into your daily life, and whatever that is that you did in your meditation, you carry it into your meditative life. I found that I'm lucky because I think I'm entering into the 4th stage of life. If you know the Hindu stages, and this, being retired, it allows me to relax. And when I meditate, I'm not thinking, oh, I got to get up and I got to finish my meditation because I got to get to work. I got a job to do, and so that's kind of pulling me out and distracting me from the meditation. That's not there anymore, and it's nice. So I can go in to do my practice whenever I want. Actually, any time during the day, I can do the meditation and the practice. If you are working, if you have a job, you're younger, you have a family, all of that, you just have to work on it. That when I was younger, I was working on it, and if you're younger, then you're at that stage where you're working on it and trying to get all those 8 stages and up to that samadhi state. And the samadhi, just one other thing, there's 2 words that I have. I was talking about polarities today, and I says, one is absorption, and samadhi is an absorption where you kind of absorb the whole universe into you and realize that in that absorption, you are the universe and the universe is you, is what the old saying is. You are a part of life and life is a part of you. And that, that all works together, because then you go back down to the first stage, which is nonviolence, and you realize, why am I violent with this other person when that other person is just an extension of me. What's the point? It's like cutting off my arm to spite myself, as they say. So but that's that absorption. But the second word that I would use for samadhi is adore. And really, when Kriyananda would talk about it, at least what I remember when Kriyananda talked about it, I think at one time he talked of it in this way as being a doorway, but gosh, I hear so many, Kriyananda says so many things. Oh, I've been there. This was 40, 45 years ago. And for all those years, he said a lot of things. Oh my gosh, a lot of things. And so, I hear what he says and I say, oh, Kriyananda said this or Kriyananda said that. It's what I remember. And I think it's important to understand. You want to hear what other people, for me, other disciples, what did they hear, or what are their experiences? And they'll say, oh, Kriyananda told me this, Kriyananda told me that, or I'll say that, Kriyananda said this. It should always be taken with a little grain of salt added to there, which is to say, when you have communications, there's always noise. There's always an interference. So you hear them, you hear Kriyananda, Shelley, or whatever, that they'll say something, and you put it in the memory bank, and you take it as information that you learned at that point. But then as time goes on and as you get more experience, you add to the information that you have. And what I find, and what I would expect you to find, is that over time, what you heard the Guru say 20 years ago or a year ago, you'll hear the words in your head and they'll be different. You'll hear something different. It happens to me all the time. I'll go back and even listen to the tapes, what he said back then, and then I'll hear the same words 20 years later, and I'll say, oh my gosh, I remember what I was thinking then, and now when I hear it, I hear something different. I think that's a good thing. It means there's some growth there. There's something happening that's growth. And so we have the 8 stages of yoga that I'm meditating with, and I'm kind of getting to the end of the meditation. If I were to give you one thought to take with you during the week with this meditation, one idea, what it would be, and I've been on this kick for a long time, for a number of months now, maybe even more than that, where somebody asked me what one thing to do. What I would suggest is that each morning when you wake up, the first thing you do when you wake up, get out of bed, is go to your place of meditation and you sit down and you say, hello, Ishta Devata. Ishta Devata is your chosen form of deity. And that's part of the Yoga Sutras. Not stated specifically. The Ishta Devata isn't stated in the Yoga Sutras. What's stated in the Yoga Sutras is Ishwara. Ishwara is God, the God of the yogis. But it's not God like you or I think about it. It's the God of God. And Ishwara has no karma attached to it. It has no samskaras attached to it. And so therefore you cannot, there's no form. There's nothing you can grab onto psychologically when you're dealing with your Ishwara. And so what we do in yoga is we take that very high position of what, again, God of God is the best way I know how to say it, or the God of the gods, maybe even is a better way of saying it. And we want to bring it down and be able to relate to it, so we put a form to it. And the form we put to it is called the Ishtadevata. It could be Christ, it could be Buddha, it could be Krishna, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. The form is for us, but what's important, and if there is something to communicate, the form is for your sake, but within that form, around that form, and what that form is and represents is God, is the God of God. And you're dealing with the big guy. When you deal with your Ishtadevata, you're dealing with the big guy, the big gal, whatever. You are dealing with God. So when you go there, sit down, and I jokingly say, hi Ishtadevata, although you do it with respect. Again, a little bit of humor helps sometimes, but you deal with enormous respect with your Ishtadevata, and you invite each morning, first thing in the morning, your Ishtadevata into your heart, this heart, whatever heart, into your heart, and you invite your Ishtadevata into your home, into your surrounding, your home being the earth home, as well as your physical building home. And so with that, I think I'd like to close the meditation and just ask if you could just come to a comfortable meditated posture for a moment. You double exhale to the left. Bring your attention to that point between your eyes at the root of the nose, and just keep your attention focused at that point and relax for just a moment. Relax the mind, relax the body, relax everything. And then in your mind, you just say, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste. And with that, I'll close the meditation this afternoon. And thank you very much for your attention and for all the good vibes that I can feel through all the noise of the world. Namaste.